Hello friends, good evening and welcome to Pune International Center. I am AbhyankarWriter, Director PIC. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Shantanu Abhyankar, a well-known gynecologist from Satara, who is keenly interested in science and atheism. He is here with us today to deliver the 10th and final lecture in Pune International Center's series, India and the World's Great Religions. He will be speaking on atheism. Atheism means a lack of belief in the existence of God, but atheists can be deeply spiritual as anyone else. Atheism is a philosophy in itself, and this series on the world's great religions would perhaps have remained incomplete without a discussion on atheism. Chairing today's session is Dr. Latika Padgaonkar, member PIC. She has curated this series with Professor Pradeep Apte, a senior fellow at the PIC. I would also like to mention that this series was conceived by Dr. Vijay Kelkar, PIC's Vice President, to underscore the multi-religious character of India and the plurality of the Indian ethos. Dr. Abhyankar, you would be happy to know that we have had fascinating lectures on Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Sikhism, and Maharashtra's Bhagavad Dharma. Some of our illustrious speakers have included Justice Rohington Nariman, Ambassador Navteej Sarna, Ambassador Pawan Verma, Mr. Wajahat Habibullah, Dr. Abhay Firodia, and Professor Sadanand More. We are indeed very happy to have you with us today. Our guest speaker, Dr. Shantanu Abhyankar, is a well-known gynecologist practicing in Y, Satara district. He is an alumnus of BJ Medical College, Pune, and in 2007, he received Maharashtra government's Dr. Anandibai Joshi Gaurav Puruskar in recognition of his contribution to women's health. Dr. Abhyankar is a writer, orator, blogger, translator, and YouTuber. Welcome to this program, sir. Dr. Latika Padgaonkar has been a journalist, columnist, editor, and translator. She taught at Fergusson College and at Jawaharlal Nehru University and worked as the National Information Officer in UNESCO New Delhi. Dr. Padgaonkar is deeply interested in films and was executive editor of the magazine Cinemaya and director of CineFan, a film festival dedicated to Asian films. She has been on the National Film Award jury and on the juries of more than 25 film festivals. I would like to mention that this program has a Q&A segment, and you are welcome to post your questions in the question box. Before handing over the floor to Dr. Latika, I would like to mention that PIC is a think tank which works in the areas of national security, energy, environment and climate change, social innovation, science, technology, innovation and growth, and economic reforms and urbanization. We regularly hold discussions on current affairs, new books, and conversations with domain experts, and you are welcome to visit our website, puneinternationalcenter.org, and participate in our events. May I now request Dr. Latika Padgaonkar to present her opening remarks and invite Dr. Abhyankar to give his talk. Latika, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Abhay. Good evening, Dr. Abhyankar. Good evening, Dr. Kelkar. Good evening, all the PIC members who are present here. Good evening to all those interested attendees who have joined us, but who may not be PIC members. It's my privilege to chair this session in the fascinating series on the world's great religions, which our center initiated last year at the instance of Dr. Kelkar. This series actually has been quite an eye-opener, especially regarding the origins and traditions of different faiths that we really don't know enough about. But today we are turning our attention elsewhere. We take a big leap from the variety of religions that we have discussed thus far, and we plunge into atheism. This is perhaps the last lecture in the series, and I dare say perhaps also the least easy. You may ask why I say least easy. Quite simply because I do not believe but maybe I'm wrong. I don't believe that most people give enough thought to the subject of atheism. Don't necessarily analyze it too much. Don't explore it. People in India, I feel, are far more focused on the beliefs and customs of the many religions that color our country. So far, our speakers from different religious backgrounds have informed us of how their ancestors, in an attempt to understand life or eternity or the cosmos, shaped for themselves an idea of creation. They shaped for themselves an idea of God, of how they put their faith in him, and of how that concept and that theology have persisted up to today. This is what most people have spoken about. So one can ask oneself, where is the place of atheism in this series? I would say that atheism can give you possibly more than meets the eye. What exactly is atheism? Well, Abhay just said that it is not a belief in God, but that question will be more fully answered by Dr. Abhyankar himself. But I will simply say, and this is something that everyone knows, I don't think I'm saying anything very original, that while this is supposed to be a denial of belief in God, maybe there are different definitions of this term. Maybe there are hidden nuances which we don't normally delve into. For instance, can atheism be defined as another kind of belief? Or are there different kinds of atheisms? Or does one reject atheism reject only the belief in God? Or does it reject anything that is spiritual? Or does atheism mean no belief at all in a creator simply because there is no proof of his existence? Or what is the difference between an atheist and an agnostic? Or which religious beliefs or religions themselves are atheistic by conviction? Could one put Jainism and Buddhism into this category? And what about Hinduism, which has schools of thought which can also be termed atheistic? I think some well-known contemporary figures like J. Krishnamurti and Osho were also not believers in the existence of God. But I'm sure today's talk by Dr. Abhyankar will dwell on all of this and much more. What I feel is that recognizing and learning what one does not believe in is as important in understanding a person as recognizing and learning what he does believe in. So it's your non-belief and your belief both are important. They're both non-belief and belief define an individual, they define his thoughts, they define his choices. So I'm so happy that Dr. Shantanu Abhyankar, who's a reputed gynecologist with wide-ranging interests, who is also a self-professed atheist, I think we have in you the right person to deliver this talk. So over to you, Dr. Abhyankar. I invite you to give us your views.
Thank you, and a very good evening to all of you. With such a kind introduction by Mr. AbhyankarWriter and Dr. Latika Padgaonkar, putting it all in the right perspective, it actually enthuses me to speak this evening. But then after listening to the long list of illustrious speakers that have preceded me, I'm rather feel bogged down, and I act absolutely anxious as if I was facing my Viva all over again. So let me thank the PIC for having invited me here, but begin with a disclaimer that this particular talk is neither a comprehensive overview of what atheism is, and E and OE, errors and omissions, are accepted. And I think that is what actually is the approach of science, that anybody, including me or anybody else, can go wrong. It is okay to go wrong, and corrections need to be made over a period of time. Coming to the question, what is atheism? And though this lecture happens to be the last in the series of various religions in the world, atheism is something that actually disconnects itself from every kind of religious dogma. So in short, it denies God. But then once you say that you deny God, the next question pops up, that what kind of God are atheists denying? Because then there are so many kinds of God, and God itself is a very nebulous term, and it is very difficult to define. where specifically this particular god or that particular god, because there are so many religions, absolutely hundreds or even thousands of them if you count all those in each big religion. But usually, when a common person, not a trained philosopher or somebody who is keenly interested and studied religion at length, but a common person, when he or she means by saying God is a person or a spirit who is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, is all good, it is the source of all morality and all holiness, something that is immutable, eternal, and a necessary being, Swayambhu. You must be, as I see this, I'm sure that all of you must be recollecting all those adjectives that are very commonly used in all the Indian languages, Avinashi, Anadi, Ananta, Swayambhu, and all these are the descriptions of the God figure. But what the common person is most interested in is the concept of God, in which the God answers prayers, is benevolent, and of course sometimes vengeful, but works by your side and for you. That is the kind of God that usually we come across when we talk of God. Just as there is a wide spectrum of various gods, there certainly is a spectrum of atheists as well. So it is not all or none phenomenon. And there is a spectrum of atheist belief and conviction. And then there are agnostics, like people who say that they are not sure whether there is God or not, but then in all probability there is no God. Or then there are atheists with a militant tendency, or the moderate ones, the militant ones going all over saying that, well, there is certainly no God and you better not believe in any type of such God or spirit. Then there are the deists who believe that there must have been some power which started off everything, set the rules of the universe, set those 6 constants that keep the universe going, and then now is sort of retired, sitting back and letting things happen according to their own pace and according to their own fate, if you choose to call it that. Then there are pantheists, who believe that there is no God as such, but the universe itself is God. But only very recently, the most famous atheist currently, Dr. Richard Dawkins, has actually given us 7 shades of atheism. So he's given us a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is a strong theist with 100% belief that there is a God, and I do not believe, but I know that there is a God. And then there is number 7, wherein there are strong atheists who say that I know there is no God, and with the same conviction as somebody says that, yes, I know that there is a God. Then, of course, number 4 would be in between. So they are 50-50. Well, we really don't know. Of course, this is not agnosticism. Agnostics would be somewhere on this scale, some 6.9 or something, where they would rather be called, de facto atheists. Like there's a very low probability, but short of 0. So almost tending to 0 probability of the God existing, and we don't know for certain. And then there are others in between this scale of 1 to 7. This, I think, is a very nice way of putting things. And when a person who is a believer, usually people begin as a believer because that is how the culture and the environment trains you. And then they sort of, grow out of their belief, and then they become atheists after either reading science or reading about atheism or thinking on their own. So in this journey, they usually take these steps and these baby steps, and finally sort of, have the courage to declare themselves as atheists. Of course, it takes a lot of courage, and you sometimes have to face ostracism from the family and the society as well. So it is not a very safe bet to declare yourself as an atheist. Fortunately, in India, we have a long tradition of atheism, and there is a long tradition of debate and discussion. We all have heard about Charvak, and Hinduism is very, very accommodative. One of the Hindu seers that I met, he told me that you can call yourself an atheist, but still call yourself a Hindu as well. That is the approach that Hindu religion or culture has towards this particular aspect of thought. Richard Dawkins was asked that where does he stand on this scale of 1 to 7, and his typical answer was 6.9, because he said that absence of proof is not proof of absence. And whenever this problem crops up, like the God debate, people say that, well, where is the proof that there is a God? And then the theist could say that you don't need a proof, that you have to prove that there is no God. So obviously, the theist would argue that the atheists are in a minority and the majority carries the vote, and God belief is the default position, and absence of God, saying that God is absent, is an assertion. So somebody who makes an assertion has to prove the assertion. That is what logic would demand. Whereas atheists would say that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and claims of presence of God are extraordinary. And so it is your duty to provide extraordinary evidence. Atheism is the presumed position. That is the position by default. So the onus actually lies on the theists, the believers, to prove that there is God. Anyway, but such debates actually don't go anywhere. And let's not get into them, because that will not help us understand the concepts that are imbued in atheism. One of the most important things that one has to understand, that it is not just about saying that there is a God or there is no God. It is about a completely different worldview. And there are two opposing worldviews. One you could call as naturalism, which believes that the natural world is a closed system and nothing outside this system influences it. And then there is the supernatural view, and which has got so many aspects and so many presumptions. Like supernaturalism would believe that reality is dualistically open, it is divisible into natural and supernatural realms, and it interacts with each other one way or another. And the most famous example of supernatural spirit is, of course, God. And the fundamental truths about the realm of spirit are available in sacred books and traditions. That goes without saying. God pervades and monitors and alters the universe. Of course, there are some nuances, of course. The Abrahamic religions usually would believe that God is separate from the religion, the universe, whereas the Indian tradition believes that God pervades everything, and it's around us and a part of us as well. Anyway, and the material realm, what you see for yourself, experience for yourself, is nothing but is less important than the spiritual realm, and the material realm is nothing but mithya or maya. That is what the tradition would, the supernatural view would mean. They also believe that the divine creator is apparent through so many different ways, like through beauty, through intelligence, through goodness, through order, through patterns. And then there are so many questions that an atheist will not be able to answer. So, like, why does nature obey laws? Now, obviously, nobody knows an answer to this. We don't know. Or how did conscious, purposeful life arise from matter, which is a non-living thing? How did living things arise from non-living things? Or how does consciousness arise, conscious beings arise from non-living matter? And we really don't know the exact answers to these questions. But then when you don't know something, it is okay to say don't know. That is what is the naturalistic point of view. If you don't know something, it is better to accept that you don't know, rather than imagining an answer, pinning a cause to it. By imagining an answer and putting it as the right answer, you're actually blocking any attempt to come to the real answer, to search the real answer. And this is bad in the long run. So if you look at it, the idea of naturalism is very Spartan. It has got minimal of assumptions. There's continuous refinement, which is a part of this particular idea. And the impersonal laws of nature are discovered by observing and studying the physical world. As opposed to this, the supernaturalism idea of the world or the universe is baroque. It is embellished with so many beliefs, so many assumptions, and it answers just about every question, like what exists and why it exists and how it exists and how long it's going to exist. And it forbids revision. It forbids revision because older the text, the more truthful it is taken to be. See, if you are supposed to join a course in computer engineering, I'm sure that you will go and buy the latest edition of whatever text is prescribed by your university. But if you are supposed to join a course about whatever religion, the oldest text is supposed to be the most authoritative text. And that is how things are. In fact, this particular approach of religion, of trying to explain everything, is a butt of jokes. David Shotwell has famously said that let us assume that each subatomic particle is inhabited by a dainty little gremlin. That is what he said. Gremlins are small imaginary animals or imps. Let's call apsaras. Okay. And that each apsara maintains the existence of her particle by a continuous creative act and its instantaneous telepathic communication with the others. And by this means they cooperate to produce the universe and its lawful behavior. That is a theory that Dr. David Shotwell has proposed, mocking at how the different religions explain the world around us. Or there's this famous example by Bertrand Russell who says that, well, I know that there is a teapot which is orbiting around the sun between the orbits of Earth and Mars. Well, I know that there is a teapot, and now you prove me wrong. Obviously, it is impossible to prove this particular idea wrong by certainly limited use of technology. But then that is how religious arguments are. Carl Sagan, he famously said that, there is a friend of mine who says that there is a dinosaur in my garage. And then he opens the garage and sees no dinosaur. So he says, where is the dinosaur? He says it's invisible. Then he says, okay, let's sprinkle powder on the floor so that if the dinosaur is moving around, we'll be able to notice the footprints. And he says that, no, the dinosaur flies here and there. So he says, okay, forget about that. Let's put some wires or strings at the roof so that if at all the dinosaur is flying around, we will know because of the movement of the strings. So he says, no, it's so small, it's so tiny that you will not be able to notice it that way. So this is like moving the goalpost, and the more questions you ask, the more escape routes are found. This is how usually various religious texts, they talk about God idea. Then, of course, there are people who say that actually science and religion are non-overlapping magisteria. That is the famous quote, non-overlapping magisteria, that they are good in their own place. And one talks about something very different, the other talks about something very different. And let us not try to mix them together or pick and choose one or the other. It is one and the other. And but then the atheists, they say that this is a disguised form of denial that shows all the naturalistic challenges to the sidelines. And you are actually, again, changing the goalpost. And separate but equal, but why? Why equality? What qualifies the religious beliefs and thoughts to be put on equal pedestal with science? Bertrand Russell was asked this question, that is the universe gratuitous? And he says that I would say that the universe is just there and that's all. That is the point of view that is very difficult to accept to most of us. Because it is very easy to keep on asking why, and obviously you meet a dead end very soon. Like, for example, if you ask that why did it rain in Pune on such and such a day? And then people say that, well, that's because of the weather system. Then you ask, why was such a weather system created or why did it develop? That is because of the revolution and rotation of the earth and so many other factors. Then why does the earth revolve? Maybe that has been going on since the Big Bang. Then why did the Big Bang happen? Well, there was a big crunch perhaps, and that led to the Big Bang. And why did that particular thing happen? And well, we don't know. So you always will keep on asking why and always reach a dead end. And then people will say that, well, that is it. No. Since you don't know why the Big Bang happened, that was created by our deity, the creator, the God. So the gaps in knowledge are actually places to place gods. And that is why what we have is God of the gaps. That is what happens. It is rather impossible for a God to exist for so many reasons. First of all, God doesn't make his presence quite obvious. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this talk in the first place. But then people say that God reveals himself to those who pray and believe. So belief is a prerequisite. Samshayatma vinashyati. All religions will never ever encourage doubt, skepticism. No. That is why on that scale of 1 to 7, you are either 1 or then you are not a religious person at all. That is what most religions would do. Then there is the argument of divine impossibility. No, all those properties of God that I talked about. So you choose a pair of properties and you sort of, show the logical impossibility of the God having both the properties. Like, for example, an omniscient God is able to predict everything that's going to happen. But an omnipotent God is able to change everything that is going to happen. Now, how do these two properties fit together? Are these two attributes ever compatible with each other? Or a logical question can be, can God make a rock so heavy so that he himself cannot pick it up? No? So obviously, these are more or less questions of logic and debate and scoring brownie points. That is what it is. And most such arguments are nothing more than intellectual gymnastics. There are a lot of circular arguments. And like I gave the example of the dinosaur and the apsaras, the gremlins, the bugs will add properties to suit the situation, and the goalpost will keep changing all the time. But what actually the strongest argument against religious texts and religious belief is the problem, what is termed as the problem of evil. If God is good, why is there so many bad things in the world, so much evil in the world? And various religions have answered it in different ways, There's this concept of Satan and this concept of karma. And then people also say that, well, God is testing your mettle, your belief in God. That is what is being tested when you are faced with difficulties. So rather than concentrating on whether there is a God or there is no God, like I said, this debate is not going to take us anywhere. What we should be doing is, as scientists or as people equipped with the scientific outlook, what the sociologists, what evolutionary biologists, what evolutionary psychologists are doing is, rather than debating the presence or absence of God, it is better to look at the natural history of religion. God may or may not be there, but religion is 100% around us and it's all pervading. And maybe there are societies who have denied religion, but certainly culture is something that is even more widespread than that, and they're all entangled in each other. So we have to study the origin, the spread, the development, and the progress of these ideas of God, religion, and culture together and come to a reasonable conclusion as to why these ideas are all pervading, seen across the globe in all cultures, and why so. And great minds have put their brains together to come up with various concepts and various ideas. Of course, you all know what Karl Marx said about religion. He said that it is the opium of the people. Freud has his own opinion. He said that religion tackles 3 primal fears: fear of nature, fear of other humans, and fear of death. And religion provides a fixation to a father figure which is developed as a child. You look up to your parents, you look up to your father to protect you, to guide you, to help you, to console you. And that same ideas are actually transposed on the deity as you grow up. That is the explanation that Freud provided. So sociologists have studied that if religion is all pervading, what are the features that are common to all religions? And a short list would read something like this: that there is a strong belief in the supernatural powers. There's a strong belief in spirits. There's a strong belief in life after death. And all religions have to say something or the other about life after death. There is the divide between us and them. We belong to religion X, all others are infidels, or something on these lines. Then there are rituals and rites of passage, which are considered very, very important. Then there are omens, good and bad. There's music, there's dance, there are food taboos, there are holy and tainted words, dress, books, behaviors, and there are morals which are supposed to be good because they are religious, and there is this idea about divine reward or punishment. So people have studied all these as proper to almost all religions across the brain. Is there an area of God or a God center? But we've not been able to pick up a deep research, and of course more will follow. But now we know humans are basically pattern-seeking animals. Basically, we have pattern-seeking behavior. Like, given a few dots, we will in no time connect a conclusion. That is what our brain is trained to do. Think of the situation when our ancestors were in the savannas and there is a rustle in the grass. So it could be the wind or it could be a predator. It's likely to be the wind because wind happens more frequently than the tiger. But it is safer to presume that it's a tiger and take a path which is away from that particular rustle, and you save yourself. If you don't take this particular hypersensitivity, imbibe this hypersensitivity, you are probably the next meal for the predator who actually happens to be there. So you cannot risk to go wrong. So it is this pattern seeking decisions, coming to safe, choosing the safe pathway. So we are all descendants of our forefathers who actually thought and behaved in such a manner. And mind you, evolutionary biology now tells us that it is not just the anatomy that is inherited, that is chosen, selected in or selected out of a population, but the behavioral traits are also chosen in or chosen out. And that is why pattern seeking, agency seeking, believing that something is the natural forces are actually have a will of their own. No? So that particular storm came because it wanted to destroy my hut. The tiger preyed on my close kin because it wanted to harm me or destroy me. So this is called folk psychology, agency seeking. That is how our brains have evolved. We easily jump to conclusions and we don't bother about causation. We associate things. So we quickly associate one thing to the other, and we actually don't bother much to find out whether one causes the other. Since they follow together, we believe that there is a causative connection between the two. These peculiarities of human thinking and human brain developed because it was easy with these ideas to manage huge groups. No, people stayed in small tribes, and a tribe of 150 would be the optimum for everybody to know everybody else, and social interaction would go on. But anything more than that, it becomes difficult. So imaginary monitors in the form of God, they came into being, and believing in something together helped community activity like building the Great Pyramids. It helped to fight war because everybody believed in the same thing, and you don't need any explanation if you have to go to war. If your religion is in khatra, Islam khatre mein hai, Hindu khatre mein hai, then there are no questions asked. The kin psychology, that is us versus them belief, it lends credibility, it bestows credibility for human interactions between two groups who may not know each other, two individuals who may not know each other, but they belong to the same faith. Automatically the interaction, the business, the transaction of business becomes easy. Even today, we have cartels by Jews who are actually managing their own business and managing, perhaps having an impact on the world economy. And then there is something called as the theory of mind, which has taught us to think about what the other person thinks of you. Like imagining yourself in someone else's shoes. Then there are mirror neurons, wherein we are able to feel the same pain as other person does, or same pleasure as other person does. So these are all things that are there ingrained in our brain, and therefore, even though there is no God gene, we certainly have what is called as a God meme. A meme is a concept, something like the gene, which is transmitted from generation to generation, altered a little bit. Somehow, any idea, a story, a joke, a ritual is a meme. So, religion is transmitted from generation to generation with little bit of tweaking. Think of the way your birthday was celebrated some 50 years ago and the way it would be celebrated maybe next year. And you will see that there's a huge difference. Or even marriages were solemnized in very different ways just a few decades ago. So that is how memeplex is. That is, a group of memes is transmitted from generation to generation. And that is how the ideas of religion, tradition, ritual, they are pervading all cultures and across the globe. The problem that is commonly faced, I mean, the problem that troubles the theist mind is that if you are an atheist, how can you be good? Can one be good without God? And that is the most troublesome aspect, I guess. But then if you give this a little deep thought, you will realize that we actually do not draw and borrow our morality from religion. We pick and choose. If you were to follow your religious text word for word, it is impossible to live your life in the current situation. You cannot follow everything that is given in your religious text, religious book, be it Bible, be it Quran, be it anything. So you pick and choose. You choose what suits the situation. You find the corresponding verses in your old text, because there are so many that you can actually find anything that you want to find. Famously, Mahatma Gandhi, when he was fighting about untouchability, Lakshman Shastri Joshi helped him with evidence from the original Vedic and other Indian texts, which gave him sort of, evidence to strongly refute the religious nature of untouchability. So you can actually find anything. But mind you, a godless morality is not only possible, but it is desirable. Look at the Indian Constitution. It is an absolutely secular piece of law. And without recuse to any religion, without reference to any religion, the Indian Constitution happens to be a good example of how one can have morality and goodness even without religion. In fact, morality, like all the other aspects that I told you, has been ingrained in our brain, has been hardwired in our brain during the process of evolution. When people say that evolution is nothing but survival of the fittest, it is the fight for survival, well, it's only partially correct. Evolution not only involves fight for survival, but it also involves cooperation. So helping your kin and helping yourself by helping your kin is also a part of evolution. So it's not just competition, it is cooperation as well. Many theists believe that atheists are responsible for the greatest crimes in human history. And how can you talk about morality? Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and so many things. But the problem with fascism and communism, however, is not that they're too critical of religion. The problem is that they're too much like religion. And that is why it sort of, gave rise to such great crimes in human history. So the regimes are dogmatic to the core, and they generally give rise to personality cults that are indistinguishable from the cults that are formed in various religions and their sects. So Auschwitz and Gulag and the killing fields, they are not examples of what happens when human beings reject religion's dogma, but they are examples of political, racial, and nationalistic dogma that is run amok. That is how one can possibly explain that. Anyway, the evolutionary psychologists have also now come up with a theory which sort of, gives us an outline as to how morality can actually be derived from biology, or an atheistic morality is possible. So I mentioned about kin altruism. There is a concept of reciprocal altruism. To somebody help someone else so that that person helps you back, which leads to reputation, good reputation in the society, and an advertisement that a certain person is a dominant. These four things, they lead to qualities such as loyalty, truth-telling, trustworthiness, generosity, cooperation. So these are the evolving concepts, and the evolutionary biologists and evolutionary psychologists are working on these particular aspects. I think there is some problem with the power, but am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Okay, okay. So I'll go ahead. I am almost at the end of my presentation. Hey, Amit. I am almost finished. Anyway. Another misconception about atheists is that atheists are arrogant. Quite the contrary. In fact, when scientists don't know something, like we said how the universe arose, we admit it. We say that we don't know. And pretending to know things when you don't know is a great liability in science, but this is perhaps what is routine in religious texts and religious discourses. They will talk about biology, they'll talk about chemistry, they'll talk about astrophysics, and there will not be any proof for their claims. People also believe that atheists are close to spiritual experience. Now, of course, spiritual experience is not something that can be readily defined, but then if you take it as something like enjoying nature or poetry or music or experiencing love, ecstasy, or atheists do value these experiences and seek them actively and regularly. So, but then atheists don't make unjustified claims about the nature of reality based on such experiences. Most spiritual experiences, as they are called, they are personal and subjective, but atheists would rather look at objective evidence, if at all there has to be any. Finally, I must make a mention about the atheistic tradition in India as well. It is a very proud feeling that the Indian philosophy certainly had this thread of atheistic thought. And you all probably heard of Charvak or Baharspatya or Lokayat Tattvajnan, as it was called. But the Charvak, we don't know whether it was one person or many. Probably it was many people together, and everything was clubbed together as Charvak. The Charvakvadis, they told us that the belief should be proportionate with evidence, that the Vedas are nothing but human creation. And rather than wallow in discussions about moksha, rebirth, heaven, hell, it is better to accept the ephemeral quality of life, which is full of bliss as well as full of torment at times, and get on with your life. Self-abuse, wasting of resources, and perpetually deeply negative attitude towards the world is no good. But we really don't have any particular text written by Charvak as such, but because there is this tradition of Khandan and Mandan, as Purva Paksha, the philosophers, they put down what Charvak has said, and then they try to put alternative arguments in the Uttara Paksha. We also have Jain and Bauddha traditions, as was mentioned by Dr. Padgaonkar, which denied God, but they actually stuck to heaven, hell, rebirth, and such other concepts. But Charvak, I guess, absolutely said that if there's no evidence, we won't believe in anything that has got no evidence. In short, I would say that, in fact, most of us are atheists, because you believe in some God and then you don't believe in any other. A Christian believes in the Christian God, but not in the Muslim God. And a Muslim believes in a Muslim God, but not in the Christian God. So as far as technically, everybody is an atheist for all other gods but one, his own. Atheists perhaps go one step ahead and lose their belief in that one last God as well. I think I'll end on this note, and we shall have some more time left for questions and answers. Before I close, let me thank the organizers, the Pune International Center, Mr. AbhyankarWriter, Dr. Latika Padgaonkar, Madam, and Professor Dr. Pradeep Rawat, sir, and Pradeep Apte, sir, as well, for having invited me here. Thank you so much.
Wonderful talk, Dr. Abhyankar. It is so thought-provoking that it really fits into our series of 10 lectures. I must thank you for this. Latika, would you like to ask Dr. Abhyankar or discuss any point before we move to the questions?
Well, he has spoken about a lot of different things, and I'll bring them up when I give some concluding remarks, whichever way I can. I wanted to ask him about something that I had read. You must have heard of the name of Christopher Hitchens. He's also an atheist. And he has written something about which I wish to ask you. He said, what can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. So it's, both sides of the coin. Would you concur?
Well, yes, but rather than discussing, like I said in my speech, rather than discussing whether there is or there is no God, because then there is no end to this particular discussion, because the very fact as to who is to prove and what is to be proven becomes the topic of debate. Like I said, Carl Sagan also said that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proofs. But actually, by accepting this dogma that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proofs, it gives you the sort of a guideline to live your life better. That is what it does. You are evaluating evidence all the time. Why? There was COVID and there were so many people claiming so many things about drugs, prevention, cure, and so many other things. How do you know which one is correct and how far it is correct? So the science of evidence happens to be the crux of the matter.
Science of evidence. Okay. Well, I particularly enjoyed your, your example of the dinosaur. And then I asked myself the question, is everything about perception? Is there something called truth, or is it all perception?
The classical scientific approach to this particular thing would be that religions believe that, especially the Hindu religion, believe that whatever we see around us is all Maya, and the spiritual world is something that is very real, and we need to approach the spiritual world and sort of, reach moksha so as to enjoy the bliss in the spiritual world. Science believes that whatever we perceive with the aid of our senses, and of course with the aid of so many scientific aids, such as right from microscopes to telescopes of every kind, that is the universe that we know of. Of course, there are so many things that we wouldn't know about, but then let's say that we don't know about them. What's the point in imagining things and, filling up the gaps in knowledge with the imaginary stories? That is not the way to go.
I think the nicest thing that you have said in your talk is that if we don't know, we don't know. It doesn't matter. We try to know, and if we don't know, we are not the worse off for it. I think that is a very healthy and a very positive thing to say. We shouldn't feel ashamed of not knowing. Yeah. If anyone else would like to ask questions.
Yeah. Dr. Abhyankar, thank you, Latika. Dr. Abhyankar, Mukul Ahmed says, my aunt said, I don't have the strength to believe, but I don't have the courage to disbelieve. And this leads us to the question that however illogical it may be, the belief in God may be, the fact is that belief in God gives us enormous strength. So as a doctor and a man of science, how would you explain this, and how would you, and perhaps Mukul Ahmed also agrees with that point?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the belief in God does help people to tide over so many problems in their life. And small things, such as chanting, doing the same thing over and over again. This is actually nothing but, what do I say, obsessive compulsive disorder, a mild form of obsessive compulsive disorder. That is what it is. Yes, that is what it is. No, but it is known that chanting things over and over again, breathing in and out over and over again, does calm your mind and probably make you or helps you see things in a different light, in a better way. If you calm yourself, think of the situation, you think of whatever different solutions, like what else is the counselor doing? So Iravati Karve very famously said that the Vithoba in Pandharpur is the psychiatrist with the highest amount of practice. That is what she said. He has the highest clientele in Maharashtra. So that is what it is. So if somebody feels okay with it, it is okay. I don't think I am against it. But then when you realize that this is the way things are happening, you learn to get over it. So there are many people who are closeted atheists. They will all the time battle with their own ideas, like whether if there is the ritual, is it helpful or not helpful? And then finally they will fall in line because of family and community pressure and all that. I think it is absolutely understandable. We are social animals.
Mr. Louis Miranda says, a lovely session. I loved the term God of the gaps. Can you please elaborate more on the problem of evil as a rationalization for atheism?
As a rationalization for?
As a rationalization for atheism. Can you please elaborate more on the problem of evil?
Anyway,
as a
yeah. The problem of evil is a famous theological question in Christian dogma. And it is not much of a problem for Hindu religion because you can explain away all evil with past karma and so many other things. So various religions have, done away with the problem of evil in their own way. So the Hindu religion solves it with the concept of karma. The Christians believe that the God is all benevolent and good. So if God is good, why do bad things happen to good people? That is the question. And then there are various answers. One would be that probably Satan has come over and he is encroached on God's territory. But then the question arises, is God powerful? Is Satan powerful? So these are endless discussions. And it is better to understand that whatever bad happens in the world, it is because of certain economic, social, political, and of course, personal reasons. And you can study these reasons and bring about the general good. I don't know, but I'm sure that many in the audience must have read Steven Pinker's book, Enlightenment Now, or Harari's 3 books, which are very, very famous, God Deus and Homo Deus and the other 2. And they have said, Pinker has actually demonstrated by quoting facts and figures and graphs that over the past 1,000 years, the world is changing for the better. So it's not a continuous change, of course, but overall, the long-term graph, if you look at it, there are more people being succumb to diseases because they are overfed rather than people succumbing to famines. There are more people dying of old age rather than epidemics, despite the epidemic that we've just faced. And there are more people who commit homicide than people dying in wars, despite the one going on in Ukraine. So if you look at the long-term history of human race, the human race is actually changing for the better. And the betterment of human race happens to be because of the rationality, because of science, because of tolerance, because of liberalism, humanism. These are the wheels of progress that we must oil. Of course, it is It is historical progress, and there will be ups and downs. It's not a straight line graph which just shoots up all the time. We will have problems, but then we know the way.
Dr. Abhyankar, you may want to switch off your video. Your frame is frozen.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're back. You're
So
back. Yes. Please.
Okay. In 1947, the average life expectancy of an Indian was 37 years. So in 1947, perhaps half the people in this discussion wouldn't have been there. But in today, the life expectancy is 67 years. That is the life expectancy we have now. So how did this happen? This is not some miracle that has been brought about by some heavenly figure. Certainly not.
So I'll take just one or two questions more because we are close to the time allotted to us. Mr. Ravindranath Chandran says, is atheism based only on the scientific approach of logic and evidence? Is atheism based only on the scientific approach?
I guess so. Yes. I guess logic happen to be just ways and approaches of looking at the world and solving problems.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay.
We lost your last two sentences of what you were saying. Would you like to repeat that?
And logic happen to be ways of thinking, ways of solving problems regarding ourselves and the world around us. So that's the approach that one must take. And atheism actually is a fallout of any sort of systematic study. I guess the people who study archaeology, you need not study science as such, but even if you study linguistics, you will realize that the languages happen to be a human endeavor and how they've developed and how there is no God language.
So, Dr. Abhyankar, one should logically expect scientists to be atheists, but that is not the case.
No, it is
Why?
not. Yes, that's a very, very common question, actually. And I really don't know the complete answer, but I believe that like I told you, that human beings are actually irrational animals. And we are taught to compartmentalize our brains into two, one for the laboratory and one for the home. And people usually don't want to mix up the two things and apply one logic to the other. Secondly, there are pressing social and cultural reasons to be saying that we believe in God. But though most of the scientists, they have an science that actually erodes the belief in any sort of supernatural power. No scientific explanation has a teaspoonful of supernatural power in it. No, it just doesn't have. Why? Even the courts, the Supreme Court will not accept and absolve any crime if you say that the God told me to do this particular thing. No. So even the law does not accept. So it is just in our thinking. And most of the scientists who probably, when they say God, they probably mean the awe and the astonishment that they feel about the nature and the deep understanding of the working of nature that they have gained through their studies. But actually study of science, or any science for that matter, not necessarily physics or biology, erodes the belief in God.
Thank you, sir. May I request Dr. Latika Padgaonkar to now present her closing remarks?
Thank you, Abhay. On behalf of the Pune International Center, Dr. Abhyankar, I extend my sincere thanks to you for having spared the time to speak about and elaborate upon a subject that is so inherently fascinating, a subject which is around us all the time, but a subject that is rarely discussed. From your talk, it's quite clear that you've given a great deal of thought, deep thought, concept of atheism. You've expanded its meaning for us so that those listeners who may wish to delve further into certain aspects of atheism can now do so with a greater sense of assurance. And you've done all this with a lot of clarity, with a lot of conviction. I would say I would take away some of the things that you have spoken about. You know, the problem of evil, for instance, or the disconnection between atheism and dogma, or the idea of how consciousness arises, because the word consciousness is used so often in Hinduism. And how does nature obey laws? And are we really changing for the better because we have a longer lifespan? And, you know, morality doesn't necessarily come from belief and theism. It can come from atheism also. And the idea of reciprocal altruism. And the fact that atheists are not arrogant. This is quite important. So, yeah, so there are a lot of takeaways. And I'm so happy you've spoken about all of them. And most important of all, that when you speak about atheism, you had to speak about those who believe. So you can't speak about atheism without speaking about theism. And you spoke about certain things that bind different religions together, whether it's spirits or the supernatural, or whether it's rites and rituals and so on, ideas of the creator. These are done differently, but they put religions together as a system of belief. And the idea that it's better in a sense to study and to talk about God, religion, and culture, and which is also what you did when you talk of atheism. So I really thank you for this subject. Thank you for giving us your clarifications on it. I'm sure other people could have other views, but you have your own views. And we look forward to seeing you in Pune, not virtually, but if you come to Pune and you come to the Pune International. You're not from Pune, no? Pune International.
No, I'm from Vai. I'm very close to Pune.
Not so far, that's right. So do come to the Pune International Center and meet all of us and shake hands rather than just see each other on virtually. Thank you a lot for this wonderful lecture. And we look forward to seeing you again, maybe in a discussion and a duel, maybe between a believer and a non-believer. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that was wonderful, Latika. And if I may just add 3 interesting things that you said, Dr. Abhyankar, which actually is wonderful, that evolution is not just survival of the fittest, but also leads to cooperation and the universal value of cooperation. You spoke that rather than debating about existence of God, it is important to accept the origin and spread of God, religion, and culture and understand it further. And what was also interesting that you pointed out is that in a sense, everybody is an atheist because we don't believe in each other's gods. So the atheists are going to be happy on hearing that. So thank you very much for this wonderful talk. Thank you, Latika, for chairing this session. And not just that, but for curating the entire series with Professor Pradeep Apte. Thank you very much to Dr. Kelkar for coming up with the very thought of having the series under the Pune International Center. And I also wish to thank the members of our audience who have been with us throughout these 10 lectures on various religions. And before closing, I would like to mention that our next session is in Marathi, Pune Samvad. It is a discussion with the president of 95th Akhil Bharatiya Marathi Sahitya Sammelan, Shri Bharat Sasne, and the discussant is Pradhyapak Rekha Inamdar Sane, the former head of the Marathi department of SNDT University. This is going to happen on 15th April at 6 p.m. You are all welcome to join, and the link will be available on our website. With this, I wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.